Hello friends. I hope life is treating you kindly. I'm Lubomira and thank you for joining me today. I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to all my crafty friends, new and returning. It's always nice to see you all. If you're new, I'm glad you found us and I encourage you to check out more of my channel. I love sharing my projects with you and I appreciate you taking the time to spend a few crafty moments with me. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. By hitting that little bell, you'll get notified every time I post something new and you won't miss out on any of the crafty goodness. In today's video, I'm sharing a colorful, elegant card. I used a lot of masking for this card, and if I'm honest, it's not a fast card to make. Having said that though, it's very satisfying to see the whole thing come together. I'm excited to share this card with you, so let's get into this video. To create this card, I used 2 of the Dollar Tree stamp sets and some cardstock from one of the decorative cardstock packs. To start with, I created some masks. I used some scrapbook.com 4-inch mint tape to create these masks. I placed the tape over a standard panel to hold it in place. I quickly stamped out 3 different blossoms from one of the stamp sets. I created quite a few masks, but as I make this card, you'll see why. If you own an electronic cutting machine like a Silhouette or a Scan and Cut, you can cut these masks out much more quickly. I did it by hand to show you that it is possible to do. But out of all crafting tasks, fussy cutting is my least favorite thing, and I avoid it if I can. I'm not very good at it, nor am I very fast. As you can imagine, it took me a while to do this. Now, if you are wondering why I made so many masks and why I was careful to keep them in one piece, it's because for this card, I'm going to use both the positive and the negative space. In other words, I used the stamped image as well as the cutout when making this card. We'll get into that later though. Next, I stamped my images. To save a little bit of time, I stamped mirror images of the stamp onto the panel. I placed the card panel into my stamping platform, mounted my stamp, and stamped the image in black pigment ink. Once I had the image stamped, I flipped the card panel so that the image I had just stamped was at the bottom. I replaced the card panel back into the platform and then stamped the image again. It's easier to stamp this way because I don't have to reposition the stamp, but just rotate the cardstock panel. I removed the panel from the platform to heat emboss the image. I sprinkled clear embossing ink over the wet black ink before heat setting it with my tool. I like using pigment ink over dye ink if I'm handling the cardstock a lot and I'm not coloring with alcohol markers. I find that pigment ink is much easier to clean up when I get smudges or fingerprints on my projects. This has to do with the way the ink interacts with the cardstock. Dye ink can be thought of as stain that gets absorbed into the fiber of the cardstock, while pigment ink sits on top of the paper. If you get smudges, since the pigment ink doesn't embed itself into the cardstock, you can erase it easier with a sand eraser. I masked my first flower before stamping the next 2. I repeated the same steps as I did before, rotating my panel to create mirror images and embossing the images between stamping. Now, when embossing, you want to make sure to move quickly because you don't want to remelt any previously embossed images under the masks that are still in place as you heat set the powder. After I had my image complete, stamped and embossed, I masked the outer perimeter of the flower using the negative space cutouts. I mentioned this earlier. When I fussy cut the images, I made sure to keep as much of the outline in one piece as I could for this exact reason. I lined up the corresponding cutouts and secured them in place. Once the entire image was lined, I went back with larger pieces of masking tape to fill in any exposed cardstock. Now, if you didn't want to do this, you could just cut out the image and glue it in place for a similar look. I wanted to show you this option because I know coloring stencils are very popular, and this gives you a one-layered look. Again, if you have an electric die cutting machine, you can do this much easier than by hand. I ink blended the image using Distres Oxide inks. I used the colors Spun Sugar, Scattered Straw, and Tumbled Glass to create a pastel rainbow effect across the image. It was super satisfying to remove the mask once I was done. After I had removed the mask, I used a cloth to clean the ink off the embossed lines. I trimmed down my panel using my trimmer. I took off about 1/4 inch from each side. To add a little interest and sparkle, I used some perfect pearls in the confetti white color to splatter across the panel. I added some water to the powder and mixed it. Using a paintbrush, I flicked the mixture across the front of the panel. Next, I trimmed the remaining cardstock I need for the card, a beige card base, a black matte panel, and a banner rectangle for my sentiment. The black cardstock I trimmed to be slightly larger than my ink blended panel, and I cut my banner to be 2 1/4 by 2.5 inches. I added an embossed line around my banner using my Dollar Tree embossing tool and my scoring board. In past projects, I created an embossed frame where I didn't run the embossing tool completely to the edge of the panel. This time, I scored the cardstock from edge to edge. This creates a little cross section at each corner of the banner. To give the banner a more unique shape, I snipped the very corners of each side at an angle using some scissors. I used the embossed lines as a guide to where to cut. For the sentiment, I found a Dollar Tree stamp set with a collection of sentiments. I chose the greeting, "Be Authentically You," for this card. These greetings all have some sort of decorative element. This one had a butterfly. You could mask it if you didn't want the butterfly. I didn't mind it though. I thought it actually complemented the card well. Plus, I've done enough masking for one card, don't you think? I added my sentiment to my banner using black pigment ink and embossed it with clear embossing powder. I stamped the image and then sprinkled the embossing powder over the wet ink before heat setting it with my heat tool. All that's left is the assembly of the card. I attached my black matte panel behind my ink blended panel and the beige card panel to a white card base using liquid glue. I used foam tape to attach my matted ink blended panel to the card base, and then I added my greeting to the middle of the card front with foam tape. Lastly, I added some iridescent sequins to the card for some added shine. And that's it for this card. Overall, I love the way this card came out. The time spent on masking the image was well worth it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. I am so happy that you stopped by my channel and I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And please leave me those comments below. I look forward to reading all your thoughts. I hope you'll join me next time for another project. Until then, have an amazing week and I hope life treats you kindly. Take care. Bye.